Erev Tov, everyone. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be Zeyde story corner. Of course, everyone. You know that. Okay. Well, it's Chodesh Tov too. This is the first day of the month of Kislev. This is the Good to have everybody here. Let us see who we have in the chat room. We have Regina and Veronica and Marsha. And a few people watching in the background. And Ethan has just come in. Okay, and then we have a few watching in the background, and more that will be coming. So anyway, so we have some good stories tonight, as we usually do. So this first story that we are going to tell tonight is called King for 3 Days. Anyway. So Godfrey de Bouillon was a famous warrior, a daring general and bold leader of men who gained victories in several countries. And so, in the year 1095 of the current era, when the first crusade came to be arranged, he was entrusted with the command of one of the armies and led it across Europe in the historic march to the Holy Land. When the first crusade, like many great soldiers of his period, Godfrey was a cruel man, and above all, he hated the Jews. In this, our holy war, he said to his men, we shall slay all the children of Israel wherever we shall find them. I shall not rest content until I have exterminated the Jews. Boy, this sounds familiar from the news, doesn't it? We shall slay. Okay, anyway, so she has joined us. Good to see you, so wherever we shall find. True to his inhumane oath, Godfrey and his soldiers massacred large numbers of Jews. They did this without pity or mercy, saying, we are performing a sacred duty, for we have the blessing of the priests on our enterprise. Godfrey felt sure he would be victorious, but he also wanted to obtain the blessing of a rabbi. Can you imagine the chutzpah of somebody? It was a curious desire, to say the least. But in those days, such things were not considered at all strange. And so, Godfrey de Bouillon set for the learned Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac, better known by his world-famed name, Rashi. Rashi was one of the wisest sages of the Jews. Came to Godfrey, and the two men stood facing each other. Thou hast heard of my undertaking to capture Jerusalem, said Godfrey. Rashi was one of the wisest. I demand thy blessing on my venture. And the two men's blessings are not in the gift of man. They are bestowed by heaven on worthy objects, answered Rashi. Trifle not with words, retorted the warrior, or they may cost thee dear. A holy man can invoke a blessing, They are bestowed by heaven. Rashi was not afraid. He was becoming an old man then, but he was as brave as the swaggering soldier, and he faced Godfrey unflinchingly. I can make no claim on God, the God of Israel, on behalf of one who has sworn to destroy all the descendants of his chosen people, he said. So ho, exclaimed Godfrey, you defy me? But he stopped his angry words abruptly. He had no wish to quarrel with any holy man, for that might make him nervous, and nervousness then was misunderstood as superstition. Besides, the rabbi might curse him. He should have. Any holy man. If you will not bless, he said, perhaps you will deign to raise the veil of the future for me. You are wise of the Jews, and you are seers and can foretell events. So they say. If you will not bless, 100,000 chariots filled with soldiers, brave, determined, and strong, are at my command. Tell me, shall I succeed or fail? So they say. If you will not bless, 100,000 chariots filled with soldiers, brave, determined. What do you mean? Demanded Godfrey angrily. At my command. This Jerusalem will fall to thee. So it is ordained, and thou wilt become its king. Aha! So you deem it wise to pronounce a blessing after all, interrupted Godfrey. I am content. I have not spoken all, said the rabbi gravely. 3 days wilt thou rule, and no more. Godfrey turned pale. Shall I return? He asked slowly. Not with thy multitude of chariots. Thy vast army will have dwindled to 3 horses and 3 men. When thou reachest this city. Shall I return? Enough, cried Godfrey. If you think to affright me with these ominous words, you fail in your attempt. And hearken, Rabbi of the Jews, your words shall be remembered. Should they prove incorrect in the minutest detail, if I am king of Jerusalem for 4 days, or return with 4 horsemen, you shall pay the penalty of a false prophet, and shall be consigned to the flames. Do you understand? You shall be put to death. Or return with 4 horsemen. I understand well, returned Rashi. Quite unmoved. It is a sentence which you and your kind love to pronounce with or without the sanction of those whom you call your holy men. I understand well. It is not I who fear, Godfrey the bullion. I seek not to peer into the future to assure my own safety, or without the sanction of those. With these words, they parted. The rabbi returned to his prayers and to his students, which have enriched the learning of the Jews, while Godfrey proceeded to lay a trail of innocent Jewish blood along the banks of the Rhine in his march to Palestine. History has set on record the events of the crusade. Godfrey, after many battles, laid siege to the holy city, captured it, and drove the Jews into one of the synagogues and burned them alive. Can you imagine that? 8 days afterwards, his soldiers raised him on their shields and proclaimed him king. Godfrey was delighted, but 2 days later he thought the matter over carefully and decided that he could not live in Jerusalem always.
His soldiers raised him on their shields.
Next day, he called together his captains and said, "You have done me great honor, but I must return to Europe, and it would be more befitting that I should be styled Duke of Jerusalem and guardian of the holy city than its sovereign."
You have done me great honor.
That night, however, he suddenly remembered the prediction of Rashi. "For 3 days I have been king of Jerusalem," he muttered. The rabbi of the Jews spoke truth.
You have done me great
He could not help wondering whether the rest of the prophecy would be fulfilled. And he became moody.
For 3 days
He was joyful when he gained the victory, but there also came disasters. And he was plunged into despondency. The reverses affected the buoyancy of his troops. Disease disseminated their ranks, and desertions further depleted their numbers.
and he was plunged into
Slowly
despondency.
but surely, his mighty army dwindled away to a mere handful of dissatisfied men and decrepit horses.
depleted their numbers.
It was a ragged and wretched procession that he led back across Europe.
To a mere
And daily his retinue grew smaller.
and
Men and horses dropped from sheer fatigue, helpless by the wayside, and were left there to die, with the hungry vultures perched
And daily
on
his
trees,
retinue
patiently
grew
waiting for the last flicker of light to depart before they set to work to pick the bones of all flesh.
and were left there to die.
Godfrey the Bullion had gained his victory, but at what cost? Thousands of men, women, and children had been murdered. Thousands of his soldiers had fallen in battle. And now hundreds of others had dropped out of the ranks to end their last hours on the ghastly road that led from Jerusalem back to Western Europe.
Soldiers had fallen in battle.
And you wonder what Godfrey was unhappy, and that he thought every moment of the words of Rashi.
That led from
At length he reached the city of worms where Rashi dwelt. With him were 4 men mounted on horses. "It is well," he said, with as much cheerfulness as he could muster, as he surveyed the remnants of his once proud army. "The rabbi has failed." Godfrey bade his men to fall into line behind him, and he proudly rode to the gates of the city.
as he surveyed the remnants.
As he did so, he heard a cry of alarm. He turned hastily and saw a huge stone falling from the city gate. It dropped on the soldier riding just behind him, killing both man and horse. He heard a cry of alarm. "You have spoken truth. Would that I had taken heed of your words," he said to the rabbi. "I am a broken man. You will assuredly achieve great fame in Israel."
You have spoken
And
truth.
so
Would
it has
that
come
I
to
had
pass.
taken heed of your
Should
words.
you, by chance, ever visit
I
the
am
city
a
of
broken
Brussels,
man,
in the capital of
assuredly
Belgium,
achieve
fail not
great
to look
fame
upon the
in
statue
Israel.
of Godfrey de Bouillon,
You have
with his
spoken
sword
truth.
proudly
Would
raised.
that I had taken
It
heed
stands
of your
in the
words.
Palace Royal, but
And
a
I
few
am
minutes
a broken
walk
man,
from the synagogue.
capital of Belgium.
Should you ever be in the ancient city of Worms that stands on the Rhine, do as other visitors, Jews and Gentiles, enter the synagogue that was built many centuries ago, and you will see the room where Rashi studied and the stone seat on which he sat. And not far from the synagogue you will see the ancient gate of the city, named in honor of Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac, the Rashi gate on which he sat. Perhaps it is the very one under which Godfrey de Bouillon passed into the city with his three mounted companions, as the legend tells. So there, Richard, that's joined us. Good to see you, Richard. Okay, we go on to our next story now. This one is called The Palace of Clouds. Richard, that's joined us. Ikor, the Jewish vizier of the king of Assyria, was the wisest man in the land. But he was not happy. He was the greatest favorite of the king, who heaped honors upon him, and the idol of the people, who bowed before him in the streets and cast themselves on the ground at his feet to kiss the hem of his garment. He was the greatest favorite. Always he had a kindly word and a smile for those who sought his advice and guidance. But his eyes were ever sad, and tears would trickle down his cheeks as he watched the little children play in the streets. His fame as a man of wisdom was known far beyond the borders of Assyria. The rulers feared to give offense to the king, who had Ikor as the chief of his counselors to assist in the affairs of state. His fame as a man of wisdom was known. But Ikor would oft sit alone in his beautiful palace and sigh heavily. No sound of children's laughter was ever heard in the palace of Ikor, and that was the cause of his sorrow. Ikor was a pious man and deeply learned in the holy law, and he had prayed long and devoutly, and had listened unto the advice of magicians that he might be blessed with but one son, or even a daughter, to carry down his name and renown. But the years passed, and no children was born to him. Every year, on the advice of the king's son, he married another wife. And now he had his Harum, that's actually how it's pronounced, Harum, 30 wives, all childless. He determined to take unto himself no more wives. And one night he dreamt a dream in which a spirit appeared to him and said, 30 wives, Ikor, thou wilt die full of years and honor, but childless. Therefore, take Nadab, the son of thy widowed sister, and let him be a son to thee.
thou wilt die full
Nadan
of
was
years
a
and honor.
handsome youth of 15, and he related in his dream to the boy's mother, who permitted him to take Nadan to his palace and there bring him up as his own son.
Nadan was
The sadness faded from the vizier's eyes as he watched the lad at his games and his lessons, and he called himself, imparted wisdom to Nadan.
and there bring him up.
But first, to his surprise, and then to his grief, Nadan was not thankful for the riches and love lavished upon him. He neglected his lessons, and he grew proud, haughty, and arrogant.
And then to his
He treated the servants of the household harshly and did not obey the wise maxims of the Torah. The vizier, however, was hopeful that he would reform and gain wisdom with years. And he took him to the palace of the king and appointed him an officer of the royal guard. For Ikor's sake, the king made Nadan one of his favorites, and all in the land looked upon the young man as the successor of Ikor and the future vizier. This only served to make Nadan still more arrogant, and the wicked idea entered his head to gain further favor with the king and supplant Ikor at once. O king, live forever, he said one day when Ikor was absent in a distant part of the land. It grieves me to have to utter words of warning against Ikor the wise, the father who has adopted me. But he conspires to destroy thee. The king laughed at this suggestion, but he became serious when Nadan promised to give him proof in 3 days. Nadan set to work and wrote 2 letters to destroy thee. One was addressed to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and read as follows: Pharaoh, son of the sun, the mighty ruler on earth, live forever. Thou wouldst reign over Assyria. Give ear then to my words, and on the 10th day of the next month come with thy troops to Eagle Plain, beyond the city, and I, Ikor, the grand vizier, will deliver thine enemy, the king of Assyria, into thy hands. To this letter he forged Ikor's name, then took it to the king. I have found this, he said, and have brought it to thee. It shows thee that Ikor would deliver this country to thine enemy. The king was very angry and would have sent for Ikor at once, but Nadan counseled patience. Wait until the 10th of next month, the day of the annual review, and the king will see what will surprise thee still more, he said. Then he wrote the second letter. It was to Ikor and was forged with the king's name and sealed with the king's seal which he had obtained. It bade Ikor on the 10th of the next month to assemble the troops on the Eagle Plain, and was to show how numerous they were to the foreign envoys and to pretend to attack the king, so as to demonstrate how well they were drilled. The vizier returned the day before the review, and while the king stood with Nadan and the foreign envoys, Ikor and the troops acted on their instructions, made a pretense of attacking his majesty. "Do you not see," said Nadan, "the king of Egypt not being here, Ikor threatens thee." And he immediately gave orders to the royal trumpeters to sound halt. Ikor was brought before the king and confronted with the letters to Pharaoh. "Explain this, if thou canst," exclaimed the king angrily. "I have trusted thee and loaded thee with riches and honors, and thou wouldst betray me. Is not this thy signature, and is this not thy seal?" exclaimed the king angrily. Ikor was much too astounded to reply. And Nadan whispered in the king's ear, "This is proof of his guilt. Thy signature, and is this not lead him to the execution," cried the king, "and let his head be severed from his body and cast 100 ells away." This is proof. Falling on his knees, Ikor pleaded that at least he should be granted the privilege of being executed within his own house, so that he might be buried there 100 ells away. This request was granted, and Nabu-Samak, the executioner, led Ikor a prisoner to his palace. Nabu-Samak was a great friend to Ikor, and it grieved him to have to carry out the king's order. "Ikor," he said, "I am certain that thou art innocent, and I would save thee. Hearken to me. In the prison is a wretched highwayman who has committed murder and who deserves death. His beard and hair are like thine, and at a little distance he can easily be mistaken for thee. Him will I behead, and his head will I show to the crowd, whilst thou canst hide and live in secret." Ikor thanked his friend, and the plan was carried out. The robber's head was exhibited to the crowd from the roof of the house, and the people wept because they thought it was the head of the good Ikor. Meanwhile, the vizier descended into a cellar deep beneath his palace and was there fed, while his adopted son Nadan was appointed chief of the king's counselors in his stead. Now, when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard that Ikor the wise had been executed, he determined to make war upon Assyria. Therefore, he dispatched a letter to the king asking him to send an architect to design and build a palace in the clouds. To make war upon Assyria. If this thou dost, he wrote, I, Pharaoh, son of the sun, will pay thee tribute. If thou failest, thou must pay me tribute. The king of Assyria was perplexed
this thou
when
dost,
he received this
asking
letter,
me,
which had to be answered in 3 months.
will pay thee tribute.
Nadab could not advise him what to
Thou
do,
failest,
and
thou
he
must
bitterly
pay me
regretted that
tribute.
Ichor, the man of wisdom, was no longer by his side to advise him.
This letter, which
I would give 1/4 of my kingdom to bring Ichor to life again, he exclaimed.
and he bitterly regretted that
Hearing these
Ichor,
words,
the man of
Nabu
wisdom,
Samak,
was no
the
longer
executioner,
by his side
fell
to
on
advise
his
him.
knees and confessed that
I would
Ichor
give
was
1/4
alive.
of my kingdom to
Bring him hither at
to
once,
life
cried
again,
the king.
he exclaimed.
Ichor could scarcely credit the truth when his friend came to him in the cellar with the news. And the people wept tears of joy and pity when the old vizier was led to the streets. He presented a most extraordinary spectacle.
In the cellar,
For 12 months he had been immured in the cellar, and his beard had grown down to the ground. His hair descended below his shoulders, and his fingernails were 7 inches long. The king wept too when he saw his old vizier. Ichor, he said, for months I have felt that thou wert innocent, and I have missed thy wise counsel. Help me in my difficulty, and thou shalt be pardoned. And we are going to pause here, and we are going to take our break. And when we come back, we're going to find out how does Ichor build a palace in the clouds. So everybody, please stay tuned. We'll be back in 6. Here, and we are going to take our break.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Sorry about that. Every once in a while, just every once in a while, YouTube will flip on the speakers without me even knowing it. And the next thing you know, there's a big echo in there, and I don't even know what's going on. So, there we go. So, we are going to retell the story that we started before the break so that everybody can hear it this time. Okay? Okay. So, let's go on. This one is called The Palace in the Clouds. Okay, so we begin. Ichor, the Jewish vizier of the king of Assyria, was the wisest man in the land, but he was not happy. Oh, and by the way, Simcha and Yehuda and Ronald, I see you're in the room. Good to have you here. Okay, so Ichor, the Jewish vizier of the king of Assyria, was the wisest man in the land, but he was not happy. He was the greatest favorite of the king, who heaped honors upon him, and the idol of the people who bowed before him in the streets and cast themselves on the ground at his feet to kiss the hem of his garment. Always he had a kindly word and a smile for those who sought his advice and guidance. But his eyes were ever sad, and tears would trickle down his cheeks as he watched the little children play in the streets. His fame as a man of wisdom was known far beyond the borders of Assyria, and rulers feared to give offense to the king who had Ichor as the chief of his counselors to assist in the affairs of state. But Ichor would oft sit alone in his beautiful palace and sigh heavily. No sound of children's laughter was ever heard in the palace of Ichor, and that was the cause of his sorrow. Ichor was a pious man and deeply learned in the holy law, and he prayed long and devoutly, and had listened unto the advice of magicians that he might be blessed with but one son, or even a daughter, to carry down his name and renown. But the years passed, and no child was born to him. Every year, on the advice of the king, he married another wife, and now he had a harem, 30 wives. My goodness, I had enough trouble with the one I had. 30 wives, all childless. He determined to take upon himself no more wives. And one night he dreamt a dream in which a spirit appeared to him and said, Ichor, thou wilt die full of years and honor, but childless. Therefore, take Nadan, the son of thy widowed sister, and let him be a son to thee. Nadan was a handsome youth of 15, and Ichor related his dream to the boy's mother, who permitted him to take Nadan to his palace and there bring him up as his own son. The sadness faded from the vizier's eyes as he watched the lad at his games and his lessons, and Ichor himself imparted wisdom to Nadan. But first, to his surprise, and then to his grief, Nadan was not thankful for the riches and love lavished upon him. He neglected his lessons and grew proud, haughty, and arrogant. He treated the servants of the household harshly and did not obey the wise maxims of Ichor. The vizier, however, was hopeful that he would reform and gain wisdom with years. And he took him to the palace of the king and appointed him an officer of the royal guard. For Ichor's sake, the king made Nadan one of his favorites, and all in the land looked upon the young man as the successor of Ichor and the future vizier. This only served to make Nadan still more arrogant, and a wicked idea entered his head to gain further favor with the king and supplant Ichor at once. O king, live forever, he said one day when Ichor was absent in a distant part of the land. It grieves me to have to utter words of warning against Ichor, the wise, the father who has adopted me, but he conspires to destroy thee. The king laughed at this suggestion, but he became serious when Nadan promised to give him proof in 3 days. Nadan then set to work and wrote 2 letters, one addressed to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and read as follows: Pharaoh, son of the sun, and mighty ruler on earth, live forever. Thou wouldst reign over Assyria. Give ear then to my words, and on the 10th of next month come with thy troops to the Eagle Plain, beyond the city, and I, Yikor, the grand vizier, will deliver thine enemy, the king of Assyria, into thy hands. To this letter he forged Ikor's name, then he took it to the king. I have found this, he said, and have brought it to thee. It shows thee that Ikor would deliver this country to thine enemy. The king was very angry, and would have sent for Ikor at once, but Nadan counseled patience. Wait until the 10th of next month, the day of the annual review, and thou wilt see what will surprise thee still more, he said. And then he wrote a second letter. It was to Ikor, and was forged with the king's name, and sealed with the king's seal which he obtained. It bade Ikor on the 10th of the next month to assemble the troops on the Eagle Plain, to show how numerous they were to foreign envoys, and to pretend to attack the king, so as to demonstrate how well they were drilled. The vizier returned the day before the review, and while the king stood with Nadan and the foreign envoys, Yikor and the troops acted on their instructions, made a pretense of attacking his majesty. Do you not see, said Nadan, the king of Egypt is not here. Ikor threatens thee. And he immediately gave orders to the royal trumpeters to sound halt. Ikor was brought before the king and confronted with the letters to Pharaoh. Explain this, if thou canst, exclaimed the king angrily. I have trusted thee and loaded thee with riches and honors, and thou wouldst betray me? Is this not thy signature? And is this not thy append? Ikor was much too astonished to reply, and Nadan whispered to the king that this proved his guilt. Lead him to the execution, cried the king, and let his head be severed from his body and cast 100 ells away. Falling on his knees, Ikor pleaded that at least he should be granted the privilege of being executed within his own house, so that he might be buried there. This request was granted, and Nabu Samak, the executioner, led Ikor, a prisoner, to his palace. Nabu Samak was a great friend to Ikor, and it grieved him to have to carry out the king's order. Ikor, he said, I am certain that thou art innocent, and would save thee. Hearken unto me. In the prison is a wretched highwayman who has committed murders, and who deserves death. His beard and hair are like thine, and at a little distance he can easily be mistaken for thee. Him I will behead, and his head I will show to the crowd, whilst thou canst hide and live in secret. Ikor thanked his friend, and the plan was carried out. The robber's head was exhibited to the crowd from the roof of the house, and the people wept because they thought it was the head of the good Ikor. Meanwhile, the vizier descended into a cellar deep beneath his palace and was there fed, while his adopted son Nadan was appointed chief of the king's counselors in his stead. Now, when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard that Ikkor the wise had been executed, he determined to make war upon Assyria. Therefore, he dispatched a letter to the king asking him to send an architect to design and build a palace in the clouds. If this thou dost, he wrote, I, Pharaoh, son of the sun, will pay thee tribute. If thou failest, thou must pay me tribute. The king of Assyria was perplexed when he received this letter, which had to be answered in 3 months. Nadan could not advise him what to do, and he bitterly regretted that Ikkor, the man of wisdom, was no longer by his side to advise him. I would give 1/4 of my kingdom to bring Ikkor to life again, he exclaimed. Hearing these words, Nabusamak, the executioner, fell on his knees and confessed that Ikkor was alive. Bring him hither at once, cried the king. Ikkor could scarcely credit the truth when his friend came to him in the cellar with the news. And the people wept tears of joy and pity when the old vizier was led to the streets. He presented a most extraordinary spectacle. For 12 months he had been immured in the cellar, and his beard had grown down to the ground. His hair descended below his shoulders, and his fingernails were 7 inches long. The king wept too when he saw his old vizier. Ikkor, he said, for months I have felt that thou wert innocent, and I have missed thy wise counsels. Help me in my difficulty, and thou shalt be pardoned. Your Majesty, said Ikkor, I desire nothing more than to serve thee. I am innocent. Time will prove me guiltless. When he saw Pharaoh's demand, he smiled. 'Tis easy, he said. I will go to Egypt and outwit Pharaoh. He gave orders that 4 of the tame eagles in the gardens of the palace should be brought to him with cords 500 ells long attached to their claws. Then he selected 4 youths, light of figure, that means pretty light, and trained them to sit on the backs of the eagles and soar aloft. This done, he set out for Egypt with a big caravan and a long retinue of slaves. What is thy name? Asked Pharaoh when he presented himself. My name is Akbam, and I am the lowest of my king's advisers. Does thy master then think my demand so simple? Asked Pharaoh. Ikkor bowed to indicate that this was so, and Pharaoh was much annoyed and puzzled. Perform thy task at once, he commanded. At a sign from Ikkor, the 4 youths mounted the eagles, which flew aloft to the extremity of their cords. The birds remained in the air 200 ells apart, just as they had been trained, and the lads held cords in the form of a square. That is the plan for the palace in the clouds, said Ikor, pointing aloft. Bid your men carry up bricks and mortar. The task is so simple that the boys will build. Pharaoh frowned. He had not expected to be thus outwitted, but he would not immediately acknowledge this. In this land, he said sarcastically, we use no mortar. We sew the stones together. Canst thou do this? Easily, replied Ikor. If your wise man can make me a thread of sand. And canst thou weave a thread of sand? Asked Pharaoh. I can, replied Ikor. Noting the direction of the sun, he bored a tiny hole in the wall, and a thin sunbeam gleamed through. Then, taking a few grains of sand, he blew them through the hole, and in the sunbeam they seemed like a thread. Take it quickly, he cried, but of course nobody could do it. Pharaoh looked long and earnestly at Ikor. Truly, thou art a man of wisdom, he said. If he were not dead, I should say thou wert Ikor the wise. I am Ikor, answered the vizier, and he told the story of his escape. I will prove thy innocence, exclaimed Pharaoh. I will write a letter to your royal master. Not only did he do so, but he gave Ikor many valuable presents, and the vizier returned to Assyria, resumed his place by the king's side, and became a greater favorite than before. Nadan was banished and was never heard of again. And that, my friends, is the end of our story and the end of our stories for this evening. I'm sorry about the echo. I did not realize that was going on, and I had to hurry up during the break and turn off all the volumes for the other things and such and so on and so forth. And that's the way it is when you do things live. So there you go. At least you got one story without all the echo. Okay. I want to thank you for being here tonight. Tomorrow night is the Rabbis Discuss, and the rabbis are going to talk about the history of the Muslim Brotherhood and their attachment to Hamas. Wednesday is the Torah study, and the parasha is Toldot. You knew that, right? Okay. So, and then Friday night is Kabbalat and Ma'ariv, the Shabbat service at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. is Shachrit and Musaf. And then right back here on Monday for more stories on Zeyde Story Corner. Until then, we will simply say, Laila Tov.